In one corner of the Anui Nui Fisheries Research Center on Oahu Sand Island, a modest collection of buildings has become home to the DLNR Division of Aquatic Resources Coral Restoration Nursery.
Well, the nursery arose from a number of years ago. We were working with our sister division, the Division of Boating and Recreation, and they were having some issues with corals in one of their harbors on the Big Island. And so we offered to go help them transplant those corals, and without getting into a lot of detail, basically a lot of money was spent on mitigating for a very, very small number of corals. It didn't assist the state, it didn't assist the federal government, it didn't assist the resource really. And we looked at that and we realized there's some issues here that we need to address.
Part neonatal intensive care unit and part bank for Hawaii's native corals, the new nursery aims to use professional-level coral husbandry techniques to grow small fragments of a coral colony, recombine them into large colonies, and then transplant them into the field in a fraction of the time it would take these corals to grow naturally.
Here we have lace coral set up in a plannulation table, or coral babies, and we have the ability to collect the babies released from each individual colony. What makes this unique to Hawaii is it is one of the few places in the world that release babies on a monthly basis versus annually.
That's the stomach bands. So we have a very unique resource that grows exceedingly slow. Average growth rate for corals across species in Hawaii is about 1 centimeter a year, which means to get an adult colony can take 1, 2, 3 decades before a coral is large enough to reproduce and provide large amounts of shelter space for all the different animals that live on a reef. That means if we're going to try to move corals out into the environment to better restore impacted environments, we need them at a size where, we call this size, by the way, a size refuge. We need them at a size where that size refuge is in place so they have the best chance of surviving, they're providing the most benefits to the resource and to us, people here who live in Hawaii. And that size we estimate is around 30 to 40 centimeters for most species. To get a coral to that size would take 2 to 3 decades. So what we developed is what we call a fast growth protocol, where we're taking these corals in, we're fragmenting them.
So you'll see after it's been cut, it's a very nice white clean cut. You can see the tissue penetrates only a specific layer. So what I'm going to try to do is cut as small as a piece as I can and try to remove all the excess skeleton that we don't need.
The Hawaii nursery primarily uses corals for transplantation from harbors as they have lower ecological value compared to corals from natural areas. May be more resilient to disturbances and environmental changes, do not impact our natural reefs, and helps with upkeep and maintenance of man-made structures. The Coral Restoration Nursery will also provide coral colonies for multiple restoration projects under the country's first aquatic mitigation bank, which primarily focuses on near-shore coral reef resources. DLNR Chair Suzanne Case says the mitigation bank is akin to companies gaining carbon credits and that costs recouped through the selling of coral restoration credits are based on lost ecological services from incidents like boat groundings and spills into the ocean. Nearly 1/4 of the coral species found in Hawaii are unique to our islands and are also among the slowest growing on the planet, according to DAR Administrator Dr. Bruce Anderson. This means it could take well over a decade for corals to get big enough to reproduce. The Coral Restoration Nursery is using techniques that will reduce the time it takes to grow transplantable corals to about 1 year. We are hopeful this will help recover reefs which have been seriously degraded by human impacts like coastal development, vessel groundings, pollution events, along with environmental factors such as climate change.
Corals in a lot of ways are analogous to trees on land in that they have a very vulnerable life history stage when they're very small. And so the idea behind a nursery is to provide a protected environment for those small fragments or small propagules to grow up.
DAR's fast growth protocol begins with the removal of a small coral from somewhere like a harbor piling. It is then quarantined in the nursery before being fragmented into small living pieces. Each of these genetically identical fragments are then exposed to optimal light, water, and nutrient conditions before being re-aggregated together to create at least a 40-centimeter colony. Prior to being transplanted back into the ocean, it is put in an acclimation tank, which duplicates the conditions it will experience once it's transplanted onto the target restoration reef.
Okay, so here we're looking at growth in response to a lot of different foods. So we're looking at live foods versus commercial foods that are used for coral, the coral hobbyist industry.
Dave Golkel concludes the technique makes use of non-coral reef source material and provides protection from disease, water quality issues, aquatic invasive species, predation, and competition to create recombined coral colonies in a fraction of the time it would take to grow these corals naturally.
Phragis lobata seems to be more autotrophic, which means it relies more on photosynthesis. It doesn't seem to depend that much on food, at least in terms of the food that we've tried and tested so far.